Our story tells about a young earl of the Stilgard family named James. When he was 33 years old, he met death in his past life. He was born into the noble Stilgard family, which rules the northern part of Navarro. His grandfather was the national war hero Paul Stilgard, a knight of mythical rank. His father was a true genius named Ray, who can rightfully be called a hero. Unfortunately, James turned out to be completely incapable, a pathetic knight with no talent. As soon as he became a count, he immediately lost everything and felt the ridicule of the entire kingdom. As a result, he died at the hands of mercenaries sent by his eternal enemy Albert. He had to suffer very much because he was deliberately tortured before his death. All this was the price for the eternal confrontation with his enemy, who hated him since childhood. James has lost everything and is now forced to die like the last dog in a dark basement. If he had a chance, he would gladly correct all the mistakes and start from scratch. A few seconds later, his heart stopped beating. At that moment, he saw the mysterious wish bookmark. This is one of those toys that were obtained as a result of transactions from another dimension. By a lucky chance, he got a chance to start his life anew and correct all his mistakes. Once he saw the light at the end of the tunnel, his eyes were opened and life began again. James couldn't understand what was happening. He was in his room, but he felt younger. His assistant Lisa came to him and told him that he was only 16 years old. He had never been so happy because James really did get a chance at a new life. He didn't understand how it happened, but now he has a chance to fix everything, and there is not a minute to lose. James must not make the mistakes of his past life that cost him the loss of his family. Now he is the young master of the Stilgard family, who will do everything to achieve all their goals. As soon as he realized what had happened, he immediately went to the training ground. Here you can find the legendary knights as well as their captain named Raphael. James immediately showed his willingness to train and thus surprised his teacher. He used to be a lazy and talentless guy who just lay on the couch and ate sweets. Now there is no time to put everything off until later. You need to work and constantly progress. By going back 17 years, he was able to know what would happen in the future. His body is not ready for such physical exertion yet because he is too weak. You need to build up your endurance before you can think about making real progress. It's time to get to know the internal system that only James can see. He was offered a deal between dimensions, and he decided to take the risk. This entire system is located in his left eye and allows him to do amazing things. The process of finding deals through measurements has begun. Now everything needs to start over. James has gained access to a large number of coins, and this will give him additional opportunities. A week later, he returned to the training ground to test his new skills. He is about to face a 6th-ranked knight named Fry, and he is ready for it. With his first move, he showed that he was no longer a weakling and reached a new level. His speed, attacking sense, and technique have improved tremendously, and he is now truly dangerous. It was an easy victory, completed in just a few seconds, a real rout. To achieve this kind of progress, some tricks had to be pulled last week. Using his past knowledge, James planned to spend his coins more wisely. He went to the stock exchange and began to look at them as if they were magical objects. In such deals, you need to look for discounted products in order to achieve maximum benefit. With his first coins, James bought several mana stones that would increase his power. The system allows you to receive discounts and also find the most valuable products at low prices. After that, he diligently studied the special mana-breathing technique he received from his grandfather. Through constant training and obtaining mana crystals, he was able to master this difficult skill. Now his strength increased rapidly, and he was able to reach a new level of martial arts. This is how the first victory over a 6th-ranked knight was achieved. After that, James turned to Michael, an even more dangerous opponent. I offered him a friendly guy. The family's eldest daughter, Karen Stilgard, quietly watched all these events. She offered to give young James a chance to prove himself and have a sword fight. Michael was considered the favorite, but from the very beginning, James took the initiative and began to attack. He acted aggressively, and it was clear that he felt his power and was ready to use it. Just a couple of days ago, he was blown away by the wind, and today he fights like a professional knight. The audience was confused. they found it hard to believe that the young slug had turned into a dangerous knight. All this time, Karen continued to calmly and silently watch her younger brother. Their father was very sorry that his daughter Karen was born a girl, although she was a great talent. In this family, only men can master the mana breath, but Karen was not able to use this technique. The girl approached her brother and said that she was proud of his progress. Of all the members of his family, she sees the situation more clearly than anyone else, and always remains on the side of good. In the evening, the family gathered around the table to have a family dinner and talk a little. Karen suggested to her father that James should be sent to the academy since he was already old enough. Ray already knows what happened today in the training arena, and he knows about his son's talent. His father had never shown any interest in him before, so James must not miss this chance. The eldest son of the family is Mark, who has always treated James with disdain. Father congratulated James on his first victory in battle and stood up to eat his hand. The combat handshake is the act by which knights transfer mana to each other. The father understands that he has given too little attention to his youngest son and now wants to catch up with what was lost. The father promised that as a gift he would fulfill any request of his son, and thus made James very happy. This situation made Mark very angry, because he considers it a violation of family traditions. James asked to be allowed to enter the treasury, even despite his young age. The father agreed, and thus left Mark dissatisfied, because even he had not been in the treasury. As soon as they entered inside, Ray asked his son to choose any item as a gift. At first, James thought about the Book of Deals, because it is the most powerful weapon. And a copy of this book is in his eye, and so he wants to destroy the original. Soon a plan came into his head, and he decided to act a little differently. The father was very surprised when he saw that his son chose a hero figurine, but this is not an ordinary object. The hero figurine was created as a gift to the head of the family who protected Navarro from the Empire. The figure is very precious, but there is nothing in it except financial gain. James explained that he wanted to buy himself a sword in full gear with this money, and then he would be happy. But the father did not notice what was happening before his son chose this figurine from the family treasury. James first looked for the Dimension Transactions book, but did not find it in the desired location. Two hypotheses arose in his head. Either the book had moved somewhere, or someone had already managed to get their hands on it. Returning to his room, he immediately began to think about who could have taken the book from the treasury. Thanks to the measurement system, he received privileges that the time had come to take advantage of. Now he is a client of the exchange, although previously only special clients received such a privilege. Now he can get big discounts and see additional information about the seller and the deal. Every day he receives offers for profitable purchases and also sees the real price of the product. James realizes that this could open the door to an amazing future for him. He immediately thought that the time had come for revenge, and besides, he had already managed to prepare for the fight. To begin with, he decided to get coins for the hero figure obtained from the family treasury. Only now did he begin to guess that the book of measurements in his eye was the original. Before going to bed, he decided to buy some more mana stones in order to further increase his progress. He wrote to one of the sellers and called him a scammer, although the guy didn't get the joke at all. Thanks to the VIP client conditions, he sees when sellers are lying, and therefore can manipulate them as he wants. In order for a seller not to lose his rating on the site, he must please the client. So he bought a few mana stones at half the price and decided to take a little rest. Salesman Hart was very unhappy with this guy, because he was ruining his business with his ghosts. James had read many unflattering messages from the seller since the morning, but he was not at all surprised. In the 3 years he spent actively dealing, James has learned a thing or two and knows how to deal with sellers. If someone raises their voice at him, he can raise his voice twice as loudly and show who is side A here. He learned something similar from a past life when he talked to one of the experienced salesmen. Now he knows how to run a business, and he is not going to let anyone manipulate him. Thus the deal was completed on positive terms, and James was pleased to receive a high discount. For merchants, money is always the most valuable artifact, even more than religion. If you interact with them in the right way, you can make great progress. Thanks to the VIP conditions, James can increase the number of his coins by 30%. After the negotiations were over, it was time to recharge a little and absorb some extra mana. James dreams of being tough and strong in real combat conditions. So far, he's coping with the basic requirements pretty quickly, but he's still not a real genius. You can't rest on your laurels because when the time comes for trials, you'll have to cope with everything. He has too little time left before adulthood begins. This is why he is in such a hurry to become stronger and actively makes trades every few hours. He found a wholesale supplier and resells mana stones at a high markup for easy profit. He quickly completed the requirements for leveling up and can now enter additional channels. Moving into the system will allow him to finally start living for real. He unlocked the Sponge Inside Head skill, and now the skill acquisition speed is doubled. In this system, even weak slugs and restaurant workers become incredibly strong. Privileges in the system open up as you level up, but James is only at the beginning of his journey. Soon he received notifications about various events that would happen in the near future. In connection with the transition to the first level, the Exchange Center rewarded him. Along with the image of Dan Tan and maximum concealment of body and sword, he received additional coins. This was the first time he had heard about a martial arts artifact, as he had never received anything like it in his past life. Thanks to the sponge in his head, he absorbed the effect of this artifact and immediately felt a surge of energy. The martial arts of this world use mana as fuel, but in the system they use internal energy. Martial arts in the system are the best option for developing your abilities. Now James can obtain the sword technique from the martial arts world that his grandfather possessed. In martial arts, it is customary to use the power of nature, as well as the internal energy of the soul. To do this, you need to combine it with the mana core and open the internal flows. Thanks to his privileges, James was able to instantly create a symbiosis of internal paths and learn sword techniques. Now, thanks to money, he can buy anything he wants and constantly increase his progress. After preparation, it's time to head to the first target and talk to the spatial exchange merchant. This strange seller is called all sorts of nonsense about love for measurements. He also doesn't like bad customers who don't show him the respect he deserves, like James. In any case, he lives at the expense of such buyers because he constantly cheats them out of money. His main specialty is selling random artifacts at inflated prices. He promises significant progress as well as unlocking potential when you purchase his products. In his past life, James often lost money on such sellers, but now he has learned to draw conclusions. He needs to buy the triple sword technique, which allows him to master 3 basic fighting techniques. Let's move for a while to the 5th world of Muram, to the Mountain Bamboo Sect. The leader of the Stubborn Bamboo Sect is Brian, who has been looking for the seller Laurent for a long time. This man has been thirsting for revenge for a long time and is trying in every way to find the merchant Laurent. James contacted them in order to make money by selling information about their enemy. He is well aware of how much Brian is eager to get his hands on the merchant Laurent. If he doesn't get a solid reward for this, he will let the merchant go right now. Brian was trying to figure out where James got the information about the secrets of the Book of Techniques. It was only a little later that he finally realized that James had learned about this from Laurent, who was still trading. Very quickly, James received 200 coins for valuable information. The Bamboo Sect is serious. Brian is willing to pay even more if he can actually get this ugly merchant. James shared all the available information and also told where Laurent could be found. This merchant is just a small fry. James is interested in someone bigger. He switched to System 1 for a martial arts scroll seller named Siak. This guy has become the harbinger of death for the Stilgard family, and James is willing to give a lot for his capture. In his past life, he tricked him into spending money, which led to the downfall of the family. Now the moment of reckoning has come. James wants to tear his enemy apart. Siak copied the information from many scrolls and now sells it at a low price. James asked to show him the range, because he is looking for sword techniques to make progress. He was given the Plum Blossom technique, which is a secret book of arts. This technique will cost you 20 coins. although its real price is barely more than half. James agreed to these terms, and the mercantile salesman immediately began to count his earnings. He loves stupid customers who are unaware of the real prices of goods. James let this idiot enjoy his life, because soon he would face retribution. A little later, the servant Lisa entered the room and was very surprised to see her master. Apparently, she noticed his thirst for murder. James shouldn't take such risks. It's better to hide his skills. He immediately greeted the girl and said that he was okay. She came here to talk about the morning incident that happened to Mark. There was something really interesting happening on the training ground this morning that is worth telling about. It was there that two siblings of the Steelguard family met, and they really dislike each other. Mark usually doesn't train with knights, as their skills are too low compared to his. James considers his older brother a child, and has always secretly mocked his stupidity and naivety. Whenever he meets his brother, he tries to joke about him, even despite the age difference. Of course, Mark is not going to tolerate this little worm's jokes and wants to teach him a lesson. James has become much stronger in the last few weeks, so this attack is not a problem. He easily dodged the blow and immediately went into full combat readiness mode. If the older brother wants to fight, then James is ready to accept his challenge and fight in a private fight. James instantly demonstrated his strength and showed that skill is more important than age. Apparently, Mark was so angry that he was ready to use aura, although it was prohibited. James can do the same, but he tries not to show his true skills. While no one is looking, Mark wants to break all the rules and punish his little brother. Very quickly, James made the decision to fight because he had no choice. It was a very revealing battle, because now Mark will understand that his brother is no longer a child. Apparently all this time he was upset because James entered the family treasury. He tried to take revenge and was only looking for a reason for conflict, although he understood that he was behaving like a fool. That no one except Father and James entered this special room, and that explains a lot. Father has never used the measurement book, and perhaps he doesn't even know it exists. This book may not exist at all, or it may be in internal storage. James explained to Lisa that this morning was just a brotherly practice. As soon as the servant left, he immediately began to make a plan to get into the inner vault. This needs to be done before entering the academy, and there is very little time left. Meanwhile, Mark couldn't understand how his younger brother defeated him in the morning battle. Even the family's second daughter, Darren, believes that Mark has disgraced himself and must admit his weakness. Mark is not going to admit it because he knows that his brother is hiding something, and he will try to find out everything. Darwin asked to leave this investigation to her because she could get to all of her younger brother's secrets. Meanwhile, an alliance of Mana Stone merchants has formed, who are unhappy with the appearance of VIP client James. Thanks to his privileges, he lowers the prices of goods and takes away all the customers of his competitors. Hart suggests teaching this young man a lesson and not turning a blind eye to his arrogance. Rather, James learned that Mana Stones began to become cheaper very quickly, and he could not predict this. He sold them for 1 coin less than the market price, and thus made many enemies for himself. Destructive competition can cause him a lot of problems, but our hero doesn't think about it at all. Its privileges give the opportunity to earn even by trading at low prices. A little later, James remembered his original goals and returned to the system. There he saw the librarian from the Library of 1,000 Swords, whose name was Chin. Sword techniques, and you will have to pay a lot for his goods. The 1,000 Swords Castle is a sect with enormous influence, even in the 5th Murim system. Yes, I thought about it and realized that he needed to test another hypothesis. He reconnected with his old enemy Siak, who had already provided him with some goods. Our hero can choose 2 influential techniques from the world of martial arts. To achieve this, the entire sales team worked non-stop for several days. James said that he is not ready to stop at what he has achieved and wants to buy something else. James needs the unique primary skill of the 1,000 Swords Castle. Although it will be difficult to obtain, Siak promised to do her best. If the librarian doesn't see it, you can get this item. The merchant didn't even realize that all of this was a cunning trap from James. As soon as he saw the money in front of him, he immediately forgot about safety precautions. There are only him and Chin in this library. If you do everything discreetly, you can easily get the goods." He didn't even suspect what had happened a few hours before this conversation. James managed to contact librarian Chin and ask him several important questions. He wants to understand what will happen if someone tries to steal skills from this library. Chin replied that it was impossible because only a madman would do such a thing. Anyone who does something like this will be severely punished and will start begging for death. So the first step of the plan has been completed. All that remains is to find the money to pay for SEO. James was already anticipating the future revenge because he knew that Seok would get the necessary goods from the library. His stone and mana reserves are rapidly depleting, but it turns out he can't replenish them. The seller refused to continue cooperation and immediately ended the dialogue. James tried to find another supplier, but again encountered negativity and refusals. Now it is clear what the alliance of merchants consists of, because their main task is revenge on James. At that very moment, James noticed that he was not alone in this garden. Looking more closely, he saw his servant Lisa, as well as his sister Darren. There was a conflict between them, and James could not ignore such an incident. Apparently his sister had already begun to carry out her cunning plan to gather information. The two sisters of the Stilgard family were as opposite as winter and summer. Darren was feared by everyone in this house, from the teachers to the ordinary maids. She came to find out what exactly James was hiding from his family, but Lisa did not answer. At this point, the guy could no longer restrain himself and intervened in the conflict. Yes, Rand tried in every way to hush up the incident, to pretend that nothing special had happened. If she wants to punish the maid, then she has the right to do so, and the brother should not spare her. Darren tried to hit Lisa again, but James couldn't turn a blind eye. He pushed his sister away with such force that she lost her balance and hit a tree. If Darren isn't crazy, then she better not touch his people, otherwise it will be worse. Then something strange happened because Darren hit herself in the face several times. This is all a clever manipulation to force her father to protect her in this conflict. After this, James leaned towards her and said a few words in her ear that Lisa did not hear. It is not known what exactly he said, but apparently these words really influenced the older sister. She couldn't believe that her brother actually found out such information, and so she apologized to Lisa. She promised that this would not happen again, although apologizing was a real torment for her. Thus the conflict was resolved, but Darren harbored a feeling of hatred and resentment inside. She cannot understand how he learned such valuable information, and now she wants revenge even more. A few days later, the members of the Merchant Alliance that Hart led were still arguing among themselves. It turns out that James continues to sell stones at a low price. But how is this possible? At this point, an experienced stone seller intervened in the conversation. He sees the solution to the problem in buying all the stones before James does. This offer is difficult to fulfill, but it is possible to reduce the price of the stones even more than your competitor. The Alliance members decided to listen to the experienced merchant and lowered prices to a minimum. James was surprised and realized that a trade war for the best price for mana stones awaited him. The Alliance was confident that it would work, but in the end they did not get the desired effect. Even after their aggressive marketing push, James still kept selling. However, they are not going to give up and lose this fight to a pathetic worm. They have no choice but to trust the unknown dark merchant again. The merchant said that he had a clear plan on how exactly to stop the offender. Apparently no one except him understands why James is taking such a risk, but it's all simple. There can only be one answer here. James plans to overtake the entire mana stone business. This may sound crazy because there have always been sales limits, but James is very cunning and can easily find assistants who will sell for him. In this case, all that remains is to hope for a multi-union, gather sellers, and increase control over the market. This way they can finally start controlling the price of mana stones and stop James. These stupid traders. I don't even understand that they are being manipulated and fooled. James had been expecting this alliance to form since the very beginning of his trading. He became a member of the multi-union from the very beginning, and did so for the sake of competition for bloody profit. There are several types of people who participate in these competitions, such as those who cannot live without instant gratification. They are called real madmen because the blood of stupid salesmen flows through their veins. The multi-union plans to stop James and take him out of the game by selling mana stones. When it reaches the limit, the traders will strike back if they act together. Hart plans to become the leader of the multi-union and lead an army of merchants. James plans to continue to lead him in this direction and not reveal all his cards. In terms of competition, many traders will be watching the battle between the multi-union and James closely. They will be forced to hire a third party to try to take all the stones for themselves. It will be James who turns out to be this third party because he knew about their plans from the very beginning. Meanwhile, in her room, Darren was still trying to figure out how exactly her brother knew her secret. Then he pronounced the name of Demon's Company precisely. She couldn't have misheard it. It was at this moment that James decided to go into her room in order to have a serious talk. Demon's Company provides the house with the necessary materials and is considered quite respected in its field. The firm's representatives have close relationships with Darren, and in a past life they created a lot of problems for James. The firm used money to manipulate him, and now James wants to take advantage of it in advance. He knows that the trading firm has changed since Darren started getting involved in their affairs. You shouldn't expect easy negotiations from this girl because she will fight to the end. Now he's only interested in one thing. Who exactly contacted him first, the company or Darren? The sister said that the trading company came to her first and offered to provide a service. James knew from the start that she was lying because powerful firms never make the first move. However, he did not show his emotions and calmly offered to work with her. Apparently, James wants to manipulate everyone around him and use them for his own purposes. They had a long conversation which ended only towards evening. They agreed to discuss the specifics of the agreement later and went their separate ways. It's a good deal for James now, although he doesn't like working with his older sister. A little later, James received 800 coins from the Bamboo sect, which means they caught Laurent. Also obtained were bamboo pills of life, which could only be dreamed of before. James experienced the benefits of cooperation and realized that he got more than he expected. Meanwhile, the users of the Book of Deals were happy because they bought stones at reduced prices. This happened because of a bloody price war between James and the multi-union. Hart tried to minimize his losses because he knew he couldn't keep prices low for long. James has various privileges as a VIP client, so he can discreetly buy stones at cheap prices. In this way, he found a supplier at cheap prices and at the same time destroyed his competitors. James has already managed to collect a lot of inventory, and now he has almost fulfilled his goals. Meanwhile, sellers were confident that they were winning this war, but in reality this was not the case at all. James has collected a huge amount of mana stones at low prices and will soon bring down their entire business. That night, a strange man came to Demon's firm without an invitation. He was asked to turn around and leave, but he was not going to back down and ordered that the manager be called immediately. Only a little while later did everyone around realize that this was Mr. Bonds, whom they had been waiting for so long. He was immediately taken into the central room where Mr. Demon and Mrs. Darren were. The younger sister of the Stilgard family saw this strange guy for the first time. It seemed like he looked like some kind of swindler, and not at all like a mana stone seller. James warned that a powerful merchant would come, and there was no need to worry about his honesty. Bonds decided to get straight to the point and find out the price for his mana stones, which he was willing to sell. The owner of the company looked closely at the samples and said that he needed more goods. Bonds guessed about such a plot twist, so he took a whole bag of stones with him. Those sitting in this room had no idea what had happened an hour before this meeting. By that time, James had already managed to accumulate a large number of mana stones, and now the final stage remained. He drank the voice-changing pill and also took on a human mask to complete his transformation. Thus, James was transformed beyond recognition and was given the opportunity to complete a profitable deal. The owner of the company was pleased with the quality of the stones and began the negotiation process. From the very beginning, Mr. Bonds showed that he was not going to negotiate and was ready to leave right now. He can't talk to people who don't understand real works of art. He also invited Darren with him, since it was she who recommended him to this company. Finally, Bonds reminded that there was another company nearby, and they would definitely be able to come to an agreement with them. As soon as Darren heard these words, he immediately stopped the potential partners, as expected. He is ready to pay the desired amount right now in order to settle the conflict. Although it was not visible, deep down inside James was wildly happy. Even Darren was surprised how this guy got the desired result in such a short period of time. She still didn't even suspect that her younger brother was standing next to her. Negotiations continued, and Bonds was not going to give up a single cent. It was clear that the owner of the company was unhappy with overpaying, but he was forced to make concessions. The price of a manna stone always depends on availability, as this item can be difficult to obtain. James wants to sell 300 stones because that's the amount he accumulated thanks to the war with the multi-union. Mr. Damon knows the market well, but is surprised that he has never heard of such a talented supplier. Bonds immediately made it clear that he was not going to talk about his personality, he was only interested in business. This terrifying look is enough for Demon to immediately realize his mistake. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, but very quickly the situation got out of control. The voice pills only work for half an hour, and that time has already passed. James had to immediately swallow another pill to avoid being discovered. Although it looked strange, he was lucky that no one recognized his true voice. The negotiations ended successfully, and Mr. Demon immediately paid for a large volume of goods. Now it's time for a conversation between Darren and Bonds, and the girl wants to know how he knows her brother. I had to tell her that there are things that are better not to know because the truth can be very painful. It's hard to get behind such a self-confident woman, because if she wants something, she'll definitely get it. Darren knew from the start that this merchant didn't have a real name and was too suspicious. She cannot close her eyes to all this because her insight is always at a high level. Darren understands perfectly well that all this is just a trap by her brother James, and she is not going to believe his words. I had to laugh out loud at her words in order to slow down the pace of the conversation a little. Bond said that Darren is of no interest to anyone, and each member of the union has their own interests. Finally, he gave her advice to change her attitude towards her family and get closer to her brothers and sisters. An adult can only rely on his family, and it is better to maintain close relationships with them. In his past life, James did not follow this rule, and he deeply regretted it. Today he is not ready to repeat the mistakes of the past, so he chooses a completely different path. So they went their separate ways, but Darren took his words to heart. A little later, James returned to his room to assess the situation. He made a good profit from this business, but for the ambitious guy, this is just the beginning. He made incredible profits and also created serious problems for his competitors. His current life is completely different because now he has no hatred for his family members. However, now is not the time for sentimentality, as he has gotten too close to his enemy, Seok. Gold coins have long been the accepted currency of the Jayon continent, while in Muram they count gold pieces. However, everyone agrees that gold is the most important measure of success. Having sold all his assets, James counted his gold reserves and felt an incredible sense of satisfaction. A little later he received a new message. It came from his worst enemy. When Seok talks to his clients, he is always in a good mood. Apparently he finally got what he was supposed to, although it wasn't easy to do given the circumstances. The heavenly cultivation technique can be learned by anyone who is part of the heavenly castle. The technique of internal cultivation is a completely different product because it is only available to special people. It makes it possible to harness not only the laws of the natural world, but also the laws of the universe. All these beautiful words are needed so that Seok can raise the price to the sky. He was always a master of words, and always found the right words to make customers pay. Instead of the previously agreed price of 2,000 coins, he demands 5,000. In this way, he has already deceived a huge number of people and never felt like a fraud. In a past life, James was one of this dealer's victims and got into serious debt. Siak made him trust himself and spend all the family money on acquiring empty skills. James was too inexperienced and stupid. At a difficult moment in his life, he trusted the wrong person. This cunning salesman can be compared to a puppeteer who understands psychology perfectly. It is difficult for an inexperienced buyer to resist his beautiful words. James is no exception. Now he is completely different, and now he is going to manipulate the merchant. James asked to give him time to think, but he only pretends to think. He soon accepted the merchant's offer and prepared to make a deal with him. James was incredibly happy because his prey had finally taken the bait. Now the name is that sweet moment when he will take revenge on this dishonest merchant and take his soul. The precious trap was finally activated, and he got real pleasure. To do this, I had to spend my entire balance of funds, but this does not compare to the feeling of revenge. James began to mock the merchant and said that this deal was not as successful as it seemed. At first, Siak didn't understand anything at all. It seemed to him that his client had drunk a lot of wine before going to bed. This is not true at all because James is sober and officially calls Siak a fraud. All that remains is to ask this merchant, does Librarian Chin know what his assistant does? As soon as I heard these words, I immediately lost my peace of mind. All this time he remained in the shadows, but now his hands began to shake along with his lips. It seems it's time to invite a third party to check because the Chin Library is also online. James enjoyed every second of this moment because he had waited so long to feel the taste of revenge. Siak doesn't understand at all how this guy was able to find out all this information because he carefully hid everything. The trade that looked like easy money turned out to be a very cunning and brazen trap. Siak still can't understand how a brat from a lower system was able to find out everything about him. It was time to tell him a few rules that the merchant must now remember throughout his life. If he violates these rules, he will instantly become the main enemy of the Heavenly Sword Castle. At any moment, James can report the incident and tell about the corrupt librarian. Siak has been stealing information from the library and selling it for years, which is a crime. James didn't stop and continued to intimidate his enemy, as if he enjoyed feeling his fear. James warned the merchant that he would die if he did not follow all his instructions on time. To begin with, James decided to get back all the money he paid for the martial arts technique. After the money was returned, James received even more coins than he had before the deal. This means that there is a glitch in the calculation system, and in the future it will be possible to take advantage of this opportunity. James did not stop and forced the merchant to give him all the money he had. He took genuine pleasure in torturing this guy and almost brought him to tears. James also took advantage of his privileges and learned the merchant's personal balance of funds. Only now did Siak realize that he was talking to a VIP client, but it was already too late. James made no attempt to hide his motives and openly stated that he was taking revenge for the past. In front of this devil, Siak felt like a small person, unable to do anything. The merchant has no more money because he spent it all on alcohol, bets, and providing for his wives. All he can do is sell all his martial arts books to make some money. It's quite a shame, but in the future he will be able to return some of these books to the library. James is interested not only in books, but also in martial arts themselves, based on energy and cultivation. While SEOC worked as a librarian, he learned a huge amount of knowledge, and now it's time to share. He must give up everything he knows, otherwise a terrible death awaits him. According to legend, all inhabitants of the first system live and die together with their martial arts. This information was never confirmed, and only now it turned out that it was completely untrue. Siak passed on all his martial arts to James. He gave almost everything he had. It's hard to come to terms with, but today he is paying for the sins of his past life. Even now, his enemy was still dissatisfied, because all these martial arts were too weak. This caused the merchant to become truly hysterical, since he had nothing more to offer. It was at this point that James finally stopped and decided to leave the merchant behind. He can continue his life as usual and hope for the best. From the very beginning, it was clear that there was no point in killing the merchant because it was unprofitable. James will make him suffer for a long time and methodically and stretch out his pleasure. As soon as the conversation ended, our hero could no longer hide his inner emotions. Everything went exactly according to his plan, and now his old enemy is in his power. He also acquired many martial arts techniques, and now his life has reached its prime. James immediately went to try out all the techniques he had received from the merchant. He was able to not only run fast, but also jump so high, as if he had conquered all the laws of the world. To do this, I had to absorb the skills throughout the night, but the results were not long in coming. James also didn't forget about the sword skills he dreamed of so much in his past life. The mystical blade was considered a lost technique after the death of its owner, but it turned out that this was not the case at all. James has rediscovered a forgotten skill that was lost over a decade ago. It was this skill that earned his grandfather the title of hero and mythical knight. James always dreamed of following in his footsteps. Now he has the opportunity. Our hero could not stop and eagerly mastered new heights of martial arts. Within an hour, he was practicing the heavenly holy technique that allows one to go beyond the boundaries of consciousness. He not only learned to run fast and jump high, but also mastered the technique of destroying despair. All 5 martial arts are completely compatible with his internal energy and are completely under the master's control. Now you need to focus your attention on developing internal energy and mana, because without them, there will be no progress. James went into deep meditation to the point of experiencing the mirage. Cultivating internal energy is a path of millions of trials and errors. Only by possessing incredible talent and skill can one experience progress in this field. James returned home with optimism in his heart as the future seemed increasingly positive. Soon he was informed that his father wanted to see him and had been forcing everyone to look for James for a long time. When James came to his room, he saw that there was also a warden there. His name is Calloy, and he is quite an important person in the family who looks after the island. Calloy is not a knight at all, but nevertheless, together with Raphael, they are the main assistants of the head of the family. In their past life, they had little contact with each other, and James never understood the guy's thoughts. The father likes his son's attitude to training, because before he was a lazy person who always loved to sleep. Ray is at heroic rank, and for his son, this is a wall that will be difficult to overcome. Although this wall is invisible, every knight dreams of breaking through it at one fine moment in his life. The barrier is hard to even imagine, but James knows that sooner or later he will conquer this peak. The father knows that his son not only trains, but is also actively involved in trade. He is not sure that combining 2 activities is the right decision. It is better to concentrate on one thing. Previously, the father was sure that only the eldest daughter had a talent for trading. If James is also talented, he shouldn't hide his skills. Ray Steelguard called him here to talk about the mistake his son made. James is not stupid at all, and understands that he should not have used the family name for trading. This man's shop was under the protection of the Steelguard family, and it was impossible to do business with him. At first, James didn't understand where this was all going, but then he realized how bad it was. His father decided to meet a merchant named Bonds the following morning. James promised to arrange a meeting, but his heart at that moment began to beat twice as fast. In 3 days, he leaves for the Knight Academy, so he must finish all the preparations. The conversation ended, but the father couldn't help but notice that his son had changed a lot lately. It feels like he is hiding something, but nevertheless he tries not to reveal his secrets. As soon as James left the room, he was immediately attacked by Calloy. He offered to talk to the family's youngest son for a little while in private, something that had never happened before. It turns out that he wants to know how James found out about the relationship between Darren and the D-Men firm. James immediately felt the tension of the situation. Too much attention was now focused on him. He said that there are many traders on their lands, and they are ready to do everything to attract large clients. James just threw the bait and his sister got caught, so this situation is nothing more than an accident. The conversation ended there, but James realized that he now needed to be much more careful. Based on his past life, he knows that danger awaits the family in the near future. You need to prepare for all the twists and turns of fate, but at the same time not reveal your secrets. In his room, he began looking again for opportunities to progress in his skills. One of these options is indoor cultivation, lasting for 1 year. In such a situation, martial arts users train throughout the year using basic techniques. You will have to pay a considerable amount of coins for such equipment, but before the prices were much lower. Some people sell their internal cultivation techniques for pennies in order to feed their families. Find the cheapest offer. James bought 10 years of internal cultivation and received huge opportunities. He tried to absorb this concentrated energy and immediately become stronger. Thus, only through trading without leaving your room, you can become stronger than a knight. As a result, he missed a huge amount of time on unnecessary training. In order to rise to the second level of the system, you need to continue to improve yourself. In his past life, he was very lucky to achieve such progress, although he never even dreamed of it. He has become stronger than his previous version in just 2 weeks of training, and this is just the beginning. It may be time to resort to using yin-yang beetles. Only a few knights know that the use of these beetles helps control their targets. James very quickly decided to find out more information about the bugs in the system. It turned out that this was not an object at all, but an organism, and these beetles signify a symbol of loneliness. They are just parasites that live in humans and cause some interesting symptoms. Yin-yang beetles are a very interesting pair, and it is best never to swallow them without a firm intention. A person who used these bugs becomes a liar and a stingy person. Even the most holy representatives of humanity lose their self-control and turn into beasts. All this from the evil god of cruelty, who had long since cast aside his humanity. He can be compared to the devil, who has a human form and uses black magic. It is also not recommended to use these spikes on your family or close friends. This may give you complete control over them, but there is no way to avoid the side effects. Once they enter the body, it is almost impossible to remove the side effects. From James's reaction, you can immediately understand that this is exactly what he wanted. He no longer needs to worry. All that remains is to choose a victim to meet with the yin-yang beetles. James went to the training ground and met with Sir Gervas. Raphael's tough training session had just ended there, and the knights were trying to recover a little. James offered the knight some sweet drink to quench his thirst after the exertion. Sir Gervas did not quite understand the young gentleman's kindness, but decided not to refuse. The color of this drink did not look appetizing at all and did not inspire confidence. However, James was clearly interested in this knight drinking this particular drink. Sir Gervas decided to take the risk, despite the potential risks. It tasted disgusting, and he made no secret of his emotions. Nevertheless, the knight thanked the young master for his concern and said that he was very pleased. After this, James asked the knight for a favor, and for this he needed privacy. Once they were deep enough into the forest, James told them what he wanted. Havis explained to him that it was possible if he followed the instructions carefully, but it would not be easy. The young heir looked very excited and emotional. He asked the knight to show his aura. All this time he behaved like a child, but in doing so he won the knight's trust. He usually doesn't show his aura to other people, but now he's willing to make an exception. One of the best knights in the army, he was truly very talented and immediately showed his skills. The quality of light along with the density of the aura is not comparable even to the eldest heir of the family. Nevertheless, James was pleased because everything was going exactly according to his plan. He began to praise Havis and say that it was a great honor for him to be observed by such a talented knight. He chose him because Havis is the youngest aura user in the city. James also wants to harness this power in order to finally conquer the invisible wall of chivalry. After this, he abruptly changed his attitude towards the knight and began to look at him arrogantly. At first, Havis did not understand this change in emotionality and thought that he imagined it. It feels like he's talking to a completely different person, not the same James as before. The atmosphere quickly changed, and the young heir began to mock the knight, and do so openly. He said that he knew all his secrets, and if he revealed them, Havis would suffer. He knows perfectly well that he is now talking to an imperial spy, and this is not a joke. Of course, the knight immediately laughed and said that he did not understand what they were talking about. All liars start laughing nervously when pressure is put on them. Not only does he know about the knight's job, but you also know that his real name is Harvest Duracle. Apparently his mission had failed completely, and these words wiped the smile off his face. James deliberately brought him to a quiet place, and is in no hurry to tell everyone about his secret. It seemed like it was just a trap. Apparently James had no evidence and was only acting on suspicion. Harvey Duracle continued to stick to his guns and say that he rejected any accusations. Now they are in a dark forest, and everything that happens between them will remain a secret. The spy tried to understand James's thoughts, but it was almost impossible to do so. Without thinking twice, he decided to take a risk and go on a frontal attack, without warning. In fact, this decision was made back when he heard his real name. It seemed that he would easily tear this little heir to pieces, but the reality turned out to be completely different. At the last moment, James disappeared somewhere, although the knight was sure that he had struck an accurate blow. All this time, James was nearby, just waiting for the moment to counterattack. His aura has emerged because he is no longer going to hide all his strengths. With one blow, he was able to break his opponent's sword and practically disarm him. Until this moment, Harvest had never worried about Stilgard's youngest son. He seemed too weak and naive to him, but he turned out to be a hidden genius and a smart guy. The aura he had at the age of 16 was something special. It felt like his grandfather's blood had awakened within him. Harvest is ready for a fist fight, because he is ready to risk his life for the sake of his secret. At that moment, James immediately threw his sword aside, and he did so without a hint of hesitation. Apparently this guy is so self-confident that he is ready to fight under any conditions. His martial arts have reached a new level after gaining additional knowledge. Now he is no longer the same lazy guy from the past. Now he is really dangerous. Harvey Duracle had never been hit so hard in his life. It could only be compared to a King Kong punch because it was really powerful. Blood immediately started coming out of his mouth. Internal bleeding is always life-threatening. James asked him to stop resisting because it made no sense. There is an obvious difference in levels between them, and any resistance could lead to even worse consequences. Harvest tried to find out how James knew the truth about him. Was it really the inspector who said this? The young heir immediately explained that he was asking questions here and ordered them to remain silent. This island is famous for the fact that the legendary knight Paul stopped the Empire on these lands. This is not a research center or a strategic point at all, and it is not entirely clear why the Stilgard family needs to be investigated. Harvest was in no hurry to reveal the secrets of his government. He kept silent as a fish. Not only does he have all the skills of a spy, but he also has a high-class knightly aura. If the Empire sent such a talented guy, then it is clearly interested in these lands. Harvest is ready for any torture, but he is not going to tell anything because he is a professional. James knows that torture will not help in this situation because all the spies are well trained. That's why he took his little friend with him, who would quickly solve the problem. These are not at all ordinary larvae, but the legendary yin-yang beetles, and Harvest has already eaten one of these beetles. He must not forget about the delicious drink he enjoyed half an hour ago. Now this bug is deep in his brain, and that means a lot. Yin-yang beetles share not only feelings, but also pain and worry about each other. If one of the beetles dies, its other half will lose the will to live and begin to devour Harvest's brain. The experienced spy is not going to believe in fairy tales because he has never heard of such creatures. James was prepared for such words, and so he took a long needle with him. Now they will be able to test this whole theory in practice because it is so easy to do. As soon as James pricked one of the beetles, the spy immediately felt hellish pain in his body. It was like a bolt from the blue. Everything was exactly as the demon had described. He warned that it would be problematic if the subject died, so he gave James some advice. First, you have to cause pain, and then throw it into cold water so that it freezes immediately. After he experiences frostbite, he must be placed next to a fire so that he can experience real hell. These 3 steps are enough to drive any person crazy. As soon as James heard all these clues, the perfect plan immediately formed in his head. The demon's words turned out to be true, and Agent Harvest Duracle immediately began to tell the whole truth. He is a spy for the Imperial Information Department, and that's not all. The Empire sent him here because they fear the heir of the legendary warrior, the head of the Stilgard family. The mythical ranks have long been lost to history, so now the legendary rank is considered the highest level, after the Emperor. This opinion existed until a knight appeared who was able to stop the Empire. He was called the Steelheart, and this knight had a son, a knight of heroic rank. All this information has been known for a long time, but it is unclear why the Empire is so worried. Apparently they realized that there was a coincidence in the fact that the successor to the mythical rank was the heroic rank. The Empire began to suspect that the whole reason was in the blood of the Stilgard family, and concerned all members of the family. Now Mark stands out from the whole family because he reached the second rank at an early age. There is indeed strength in the blood of this family, but with each generation it weakens. This was believed until this day, when the spy Harvest Duracle saw the true power of the younger heir. Apparently, he was the one who inherited most of his grandfather's strength, and now he will be able to achieve greatness. Harvest was confident in his theory, but only James realizes that he is completely wrong. After all, the true nature of his power is that he uses the aura from the Book of Dimensional Transactions. All his power has nothing to do with his inheritance or his grandfather's blood. Only now did he begin to understand that all this could be connected with the disappearance of his father. In his past life, this is exactly what happened, because the fall of his family began with the disappearance of the head of the family. This strange situation was called the biggest mystery of Navarro, and even now James still does not understand what happened in his past life. Now the Empire wants not only to keep an eye on his family, but also to prevent the birth of a new Stilgard hero. Meanwhile, the father of the family did not forget about active training and self-improvement. Lately he has been having problems because during training his throat starts to hurt, and he starts spitting blood. During rest there is no recovery. Regeneration stops working at the proper level. It felt like he was facing an inner demon, a force of the mind that he had never fought before. A little later, Kelloi disturbed him because the Lord should know that the youngest son brought the merchant bonds. It was unclear why such mundane news had to be announced urgently, but Kelloi soon explained everything. The merchant didn't come alone. He brought an imperial spy with him, and that changes everything. It was strange to hear, and so the Lord immediately headed to the entrance of the estate to see for himself. Many people had already gathered there, not only family members, but also knights who were interested in seeing the spy. Of course, everyone recognized the spy because he had been part of the family for many years. Now the man is dead. James says he tried to keep him alive but failed. He did not come alone, but together with the merchant Bonds, who is already ready to confirm everything that happened. Indeed, as strange as it may seem, the Mana Stone seller was next to James. James quickly explained that he was meeting a merchant and noticed that they were being followed. He grabbed the spy and asked him to explain his actions, but Sir Jevis immediately drew his sword and began to attack. James has absolute proof that this man was a spy. It is in his letter. Everyone around was eagerly awaiting the Lord's opinion, because this whole situation was really too strange. James looked tense, but at the same time he did not lose self-control and tried to contain his emotions. The father read the letter and then loudly announced that he believed this confirmation, and Havis really was with the spy. There was some kind of code in the letter. The Imperial Information Department often engages in such tricks. It was clear that the eldest son of the family did not believe the evidence. He thought that all of this could just be a fake. His father asked him to calm down because it seemed that Mark was defending the Empire. He explained to his son that most people always believe in the best, which is why religion is so popular. The Lord must think differently because if there is no rain, then one must prepare for drought and not believe in miracles. After this, Ray Stilgard thanked James for his wonderful work and asked him to see a doctor because he might be injured. It was very difficult for Mark to watch everything that was happening, because as we know, he hates his little brother. After this conversation, James went to his room with the merchant. He only had a small scratch on his body, but the doctors prescribed treatment as if he were disabled. After this, he asked the merchant to no longer hide his true face and to remove the mask. It was really hard to believe, but once the mask was removed, it became clear that Harvest Duracle was hiding underneath. A few minutes ago, he negotiated with Ray Steelguard on behalf of the Mana Stone merchant. The father did not ask any unnecessary questions. It became clear that he was not at all interested in the mysterious seller. Harvest could not fully unravel the mystery of this young heir. He began to ask many questions. He wonders where James gets his different masks to change his appearance from and why he hides his abilities. James gave only general answers and always tried to change the subject of conversation. A little later, Harvest said that he already knows a lot about the Steelguard family, but will not use it for blackmail purposes. James asked him not to mention this information because few people would believe it. He also reminded that Harvest was completely under his control, thanks to the yin-yang beetles. A little later, they got down to business. James decided to check the report that was written by the spy about the Steelguard family. Each family member received a detailed profile describing their best and worst qualities. There was nothing particularly interesting in this characteristic, since the father was still at the same level and his eldest son was developing slowly. It was told that Jason Steelguard is trying to explore his body and find himself, and James had the worst characteristics because he is a non-entity who shows no signs of progress. James was a little unhappy at being called a nobody, but nevertheless agreed that the report was plausible. All communication takes place through Agent Arcadio, which means James needs to go on a short trip. After a short conversation, they parted ways, and now Harvey Durakel must play the role of a double agent. James will also have a lot of work, because she needs to not only keep an eye on the Empire, but also figure out its future plans. A few minutes later, the father of the family entered the room to check on his son's well-being. James assured his father that he was fine and that the battle with the spy had not taken much of his health. He felt a rather strange feeling because in his past life, his father almost never came to his room. They didn't have any personal conversations, and it's quite difficult to get used to it now. Ray remained calm, but it was clear that his son was very uncomfortable with the prolonged silence. Father believes that the number of guards needs to be increased to ensure that there are no more spies. Now the father understands that the Empire is aimed at his family and will not be as careless as in his past life. He wants James to be more careful now because he is afraid of losing his precious son to spies. In his past life, the father treated his youngest son completely differently. It was a cold but respectful attitude. Now he has completely changed. Although he remains strict and disciplined, he treats James more warmly. Oddly enough, James saw the fall of every member of his family except his father. The disappearance of the heroes will happen in 2 years, and during this period, in a past life, James was at the academy. Now he has a good opportunity to get closer to his father to understand his motivation and perception of the world. Soon the conversation was over, and the father promised his son to show him the inner secret storage. James immediately said that he was not interested in gold, so that his father would not consider his son too mercantile. Ray took note of this and left his son inside the vault for a while. Now James can finally give free rein to his ideas and find everything he needs. The external secret storage facility contains emergency supplies in case of unforeseen situations. If we talk about the internal storage, then everything is completely different here, because here you can find rare and unique items. For example, the shield of the commander, who was depressed by the king, is enchanted with the magic of increasing fighting spirit. Such a shield can support the spirit of an entire army, but a true hero can do without this artifact. Whenever the king gives something like this, he always has ulterior motives, hinting that the Steelguard family is his shield. When the king's motives were revealed, the grandfather of the family placed the shield here, and it was forgotten for a time. After winning the war, Paul could do whatever he wanted, because he was a mythical ranked knight with the support of society. He could even have captured the entire kingdom, but he remained neutral until the very end. His rewards from the king were countless, but none of this compares to his contribution to the defense of the empire. Also in this storage you can find the equipment of a mythical warrior, which is the stuff of legends. The main artifact of this equipment is a sword called Dark Sky, which has destroyed thousands of enemies. James decided to put this sword into his inventory in order to check its characteristics. It turned out that the blacksmith had been creating this weapon for hundreds of days, and thus the sword contains the spirit and tenacity of the master. After James had satisfied his curiosity, he continued wandering around the vault. We must not forget that he came here to find the Book of Dimension Transactions, because it is too important for his future. If she falls into the hands of his loved ones, he may repeat the mistakes of the past, so this cannot be allowed. James isn't entirely sure that this book exists anywhere other than in his head, since he couldn't even find it in the storage room. If the book is not here, then it remains to change the focus of attention and ask other questions. James must understand how he got into the past and started interacting with the spatial exchange system. Since the day he returned, he feels like the wish bookmark he saw before his death is to blame for everything. It was so painful for him then that he doesn't even remember what happened, but it seems he asked fate for another chance. It's strange because the wish bookmark only allows you to use one wish, and he wanted a lot. This was a request not only for a second chance, but also for the monopolization of spatial trade. Since he couldn't find the measurement book, James decided to take something else with him so as not to be left empty-handed. His father didn't set any limits for him, so he could even take his grandfather's dark sky sword. For a while, he was really sure that this was the best gift, but then he realized that it was too much. Here you can find many magical items that once seemed incredibly valuable, but now he has no need for them. At that moment, James saw a black ostrich egg underneath him, which was not the first time he had come across it. This internal storage may be grandfather's personal storage, as he was the greatest merchant in the spatial dimension. All these objects cannot be ignored, because this ostrich egg could have come here from another dimension. James put it in his inventory and checked the stats, but didn't see any special features. James decided not to back down and activated the Eye of Conduct skill in order to delve deeper into the essence of this egg. After some time, he remembered the day he entered the academy from his past life and recalled every detail of that moment. Then the people in the estate were happy that they finally got rid of this guy and hoped that he would become at least a little smarter. However, some continued to scoff and insist that people like James never learn from their past. It was like a celebration when people get rid of a person they widely hate. Now the picture is completely different because this guy is seen off almost with tears in his eyes, asked to be careful and come back quickly. James is pleased to see such a change in attitude because he himself is credited with such changes. He used to be the one everyone avoided, but today he is the main hope of the Steelguard family, and this cannot but please. The older sister, who had always treated James warmly, came to say goodbye to the youngest heir. In addition to general wishes, she handed him a small bag of gold so that James would not deny himself anything. Karen always made him happy with her attitude. The same could be observed in her past life. At first, James didn't notice anything special about this gift, but then he thought about it. He remembers very well that in her past life his sister never had any extra money. Previously, she always wore a ruby pendant around her neck, but now it has suddenly disappeared somewhere. He said goodbye to his sister and sat down in his quarry, but all these thoughts did not leave his head for a long time. James kept looking at this little gift and realized at what price it had come to him. The ruby pendant did not belong to the mother, nor was it passed down from generation to generation, so it was indeed easy to part with it. However, this self-sacrifice means a lot, because the ruby was his sister's favorite piece of jewelry throughout her life. Maybe she feels too much pressure and tries to help. You feel like it's her duty. After all, we must not forget that the Steelguard family did not have a mistress, and Karen took on these functions. James soon realized that he had no time to be sad, because now he needed to prepare for the challenges ahead. He logged in and saw that more than 50 coins had been received from Seok, who continued to give everything he had to his new master. James said that this was not enough and demanded that it bring him much more profit. It is clear that the merchant suffers too much from such cooperation, but he himself is to blame for his troubles. There is currently a slave contract in effect between them, which was concluded after their last conversation. In exchange for keeping the secret and protecting him, the SEOC must follow all orders and give 80% of the profits to James. The contract is written for the next 100 years, and now Siak must forget about the luxury and fun he enjoyed in the past. James doesn't feel sorry for the guy at all, and he's really enjoying the process. A little later, he ordered the merchant to get him the Book of Patricia's Breath, who is a master of the sword. This book gives you the opportunity to improve your skills without worrying about potential problems. James is getting more and more benefits from his cooperation with the merchant, and this cannot stop there. This is a pretty good martial arts book that James decided to give to his older sister. He understands that he must take care of her, and also knows how close martial arts of the sword are to her. Karen has a certain talent, and in her past lives she was much stronger than James. If she can learn iron breathing now, it will help protect the Stilgard family. Becoming a knight is very difficult, but the sister will not miss the chance to use her talent. Finally, James turned his attention to Darren, because they hadn't spoken for several days in a row. He hinted to his sister that although he was leaving for another city, he would continue to follow her from a distance. In a past life, going to the academy could be compared to going to hell, to meet the devil. Now a lot has changed, because now his family looks at James completely differently. Positive attitudes from others influence James's perception of happiness, and he feels more comfortable. It resonates too much with his past, and all these changes benefit not only him, but also the family. How the differences will only grow in the future, and he will be able to prevent the fall of Stilgard. Now it's time to deal with the mysterious egg, which is also called the Bulgasari egg. At birth, the creature from the egg will be very weak, but then it will grow stronger and turn into a beast that loves to eat metal. Adult Bulgasari is so powerful that it is capable of causing real natural disasters, although it is hard to believe now. James contacted a seller named Henry and said he wanted to buy a guide to taming Bulgasari. Henry has no intention of selling such a manual, but it is only a question of price. He tries to make the most of the taming guide, but James is too cunning to play other people's games. He is trying to use a licensed item without paying the full amount, even though the item was created by the Emperor himself. This book has a copyright mark on it, and selling copies with such mark is officially prohibited. If the seller is caught doing this, they will be banned forever and all the coins will be taken away, which is why such books are more expensive. Soon James was able to push the price down and buy the book at a good discount, all thanks to his VIP client privileges. In this way, he gained access to secret knowledge about Bulgasari, who is a regional-level werewolf. This monster can reach the planetary level, and yet it seemed like it was just an ordinary pet. As soon as James heard about the planetary level, he immediately became scared because it is an unimaginable power. Soon he had absorbed all the information, and the knowledge was truly worth the asking price. Bulgasari is not called the Emperor of Beasts for nothing. He can achieve incredible progress. Hatching the egg is just the beginning, because this monster will be difficult to grow in the first system. A werewolf is an imperfect organism, and its creation requires genetic information from another organism. In order for it to become bigger and stronger, it needs the support of genetic information as a basis. So James needs to find a strong organism, and until then, some kind of animal would be ideal. Beasts exist even in the first system, although martial arts users call them spirits. Such animals are actively sold in the store because they are very valuable goods in any market. I had to contact Siak again and warn him that he had to tame the spirit to grow Bulgasari. He said that the blood of an ancient turtle is ideal for cultivation, but one should not expect stunning results. You can also use a bloody fire dragon, which is what snakes become when they train for thousands of years. James decided to use the blood of the bloodfire dragon and bought a small portion at a reasonable price. This egg has been in storage for 10 years, but now it's time to evolve. The Bulgasari egg reacted immediately, even though it had not made any sounds before. Now all that remains is to wait. Sooner or later the beast will finally hatch from the egg. James tried not to waste any extra time and to engage in internal energy search and meditation. Several hours passed during this activity, and apparently the blood of the bloody fire dragon finally took effect. Now the infamous werewolf is supposed to appear, which is supposed to reach the planetary level and become a living disaster. It seemed like this monster would look spectacular, but the reality turned out to be too harsh. Even though James thought the werewolf should look completely different, he was still happy. I had to make a wound on my hand so that the baby wouldn't die of hunger. Adult Bulgasari do not have mammary glands, so they feed their young with blood instead of milk. The kids will remember the taste of the monster and will treat it as their own, so James will become a real mother for the monster. The main thing is not to overdo it because you can die from blood loss if you feed your baby too often. Without thinking twice, John decided to name this little killer Sari because it sounds pretty similar, Sari Bulgasari. James soon met again with the Empire's double spy, Harvey's Duracle. He is now responsible for his security and his main job is to protect James. Now it was decided to stop for a short rest and then continue on our way until sunset. Harvis always looked around carefully and immediately felt the approach of an unknown object. He instantly grabbed his weapon and prepared to fight, but was stopped at the last moment by James. Everything turned out to be much simpler than it seemed at first glance because it was just a little Sari. James said that it was a small animal and should not be attacked, although it was a real killer. It must not be forgotten that Bulgasari is a ferocious beast and becomes stronger when it eats metal. It can also take other forms, so its use can be very beneficial. Sari may be difficult to control in the future, so James must think about his leverage in advance. Based on the Emperor's theory, the potential strength of this beast goes beyond normal capabilities. In order for a beast to become stronger, it must be given the strength of the organism, and James did this using dragon blood. Now you need to find energy and buy elixirs, but the problem is that such items are too expensive. Now Sari is eating the bamboo life pill obtained from the mountain bamboo sect, but its price is not cheap. Even if you sell all your things, it will be difficult to satisfy the baby's needs, so you need to come up with something. There is only a little time left before James can trade new goods. He must choose something that has a high base cost to make a big profit. A few seconds later, he had an epiphany and finally understood what exactly he needed. His choice fell on internal cultivation because it sells well and has an amazing demand in the first system. You can earn a lot of money on such a product because its cost is quite high. In order to become incredibly rich, you just need to engage in classic resale and not invent anything. It's hard to even imagine how much you can earn in the first few months of selling, although the exchange center may create some difficulties. James has received several bonuses for past sales and is ready to use this money to purchase elixirs. All these investments are aimed at future enrichment, which will help solve many of the family's problems. Over the next few days, Sari has changed quite a lot, growing by leaps and bounds. James can't stop being happy because he finally has a close friend to play with. Bulgasari's fur color varies depending on the first blood, and its fangs and fur will change over time once the baby stage is over. There is no point in feeding him elixirs now, because he is already old enough, and the coin-eater stage is over. About half of all funds went to maintaining and feeding this little monster, but it was worth it. Now James wants to spend some money on improving his appearance, because that's also important. In his past life he was irresistible, although it only lasted for a short period of time. Appearance is also a power, and in this life you need to do everything possible to look your best. While James was busy with trading, time flew by very quickly, and their road would soon be over. All this time they were inexorably approaching the second city of the Navarro Empire, called Arcadio. Here you can find beautiful architecture and beautiful places that are not available in all cities of the empire. James ordered his assistant to take care of the accommodation of all the Stilgard servants and gave him the money he received from his sister. There is also an important meeting coming up soon. Harvis has already left a mark near the castle walls, and they will be contacted soon. In the evening, the visitors enjoyed hospitality and a well-deserved rest after a long journey. James spent all his time with Harvis, but later the knights and servants took him away to drink some beer. Harvis didn't mind, but James warned him that if he drank even one glass, he would die immediately. This was enough for him to immediately refuse the guy's offer and say that he preferred only water. Soon night fell, and the time came for that very meeting that had been discussed in advance. Harvis and James arrived at their destination and made sure that no one was following them. They're supposed to meet an agent named Trevor, a guy Harvest used to work with. They can go together to meet, but Arcadio has too many eyes that might see something extra. Harvest is absolutely right, but James can't trust every word he says, because he is a spy after all. Although they have become closer recently, this is not enough to build a real, trusting relationship. He ordered an immediate progress report, because despite everything that was happening, he had to be attentive. Soon James was convinced that everything was fine, and there was no need to worry too much. It was clear that Harvest was offended by such a relationship, but he understood everything. And now he understands his place and does not want to go through hell again because of some incomprehensible suspicions. James did not search him, but calmly gave his report, as if these words had influenced him. The spy left for the meeting and promised to return as soon as the negotiations were completed. It is always difficult to understand the real intentions of another person, and therefore James must go through an important process. He activated invisibility thanks to the third circle of transparency magic. His body immediately became invisible, and now he can do whatever he wants and remain incognito. By adding a small amount of mana, the body becomes light and the person gains the ability to float above the air. Now James easily remains unnoticed, as if becoming a living shadow. From a vantage point, James will observe the meeting between Harvest and Trevor and will not have to worry about being discovered. So far, Harvest has been behaving quite professionally, remaining calm and fully adapting to his surroundings. Only after some time did it become clear that several people were following him. James realized that he had made the right decision to stay at a distance and not risk his reputation. Soon Harvest came to the right house, knocked, and without further explanation entered inside. So far, everything is going according to plan, but James still needs to try out his new martial arts skills. He improved his perception and now hears absolutely everything that happens in this house. So far, the conversation doesn't stand out in any way, although it immediately became clear that Trevor and Harvest had indeed met. He gave him some general information about the Steelguard family, and then got to the point. Harvest calmly explained that Gilbert, who was also working undercover, was dead. Most likely, he was caught and tortured for a long time before being brutally killed, so this guy is really a pity. Then Trevor thought for a moment, and very quickly his expression changed, as if something had just dawned on him. He looked closely at his interlocutor and said that the academy was very far from Arcadio. He hinted that the special agent's story didn't seem very credible, since he had no reason to come here with James. The situation instantly turned upside down, and the tension in the room reached its peak. Oddly enough, Harvest remained calm and said he saw nothing suspicious about it. His confidence really did rub off on these guys. Trevor laughed and said it was just a joke. He regrets what happened to Gilbert, but he can't help, because the life of a spy is full of danger. You can't do your job if you're constantly regretting the deaths of other people, so you have to accept things as they are. Harvest said that he got here under a stupid pretext and used the younger heir for this. He brought here a report on the progress of his work and asked that this report be encrypted and transmitted to the Empire. At this point, their rather strange dialogue ended, although there remained a feeling of something left unsaid. Thus James saw what the life of a spy meant, and that it was not at all sweet. James was about to leave, but he witnessed the continuation of the conversation, which concerned his family. Trevor and his men discussed how strange it was that the agent was alive and the contact was dead. Trevor doesn't think about the fact that Harvest was able to change sides because he is a very reliable guy. He also said that Harvest values his family incredibly and would rather die than cause them trouble. Everything must be decided by the top management, and all they have to do is pass on the information they receive. This whole conversation has revealed some information about this guy, and now it is clear that he has reasons for certain actions. Jeff was about to return to his quarters and fall asleep, but he saw that in the middle of the night some rowdy guys were getting ready to fight. Taking a closer look, he realized that his people were involved in all of this, and they should already be asleep. They quarreled over their masters, the Steelguard family, and also Marquis Albert. As soon as James heard the name of this man, he immediately remembered his terrible past. Meanwhile, a conflict has begun between the knights, and now it will be very difficult to stop them. They were very lucky that at the last moment a real authority figure intervened who would not tolerate a fight during his shift. Just his voice alone was enough to make all these brave guys stop in an instant and cool their ardor. In front of them, standing at full height, stood the tall and powerful second captain. James was still watching the situation. Lee could barely hide his contempt and hatred. He immediately remembered the terrible torture he felt on his body in the last seconds of his past life. Now he will see again the man who took everything from him and did it in a very harsh manner. No, this is not the second captain at all, but the one who is behind him and leads the knights. Albert, the very man who makes James's hands shake and her heart beat faster. He couldn't even suspect that their meeting would take place so early, and yet he still dreams about the place. James tried to restrain himself, but first of all he had to figure out what to do, because he wanted to kill this guy so badly. Of course it would be stupid to do this now, because you can't kill him quickly and painlessly, that's not enough. Before such an event, you will have to clear a few days in your schedule in order to fully immerse yourself in the world of torture and cruelty. Meanwhile, the second captain ordered the knights to disperse immediately, or they would regret being born. This captain's name is Derek. He is known for his unscrupulousness and fighting skills. He tried to find out what the Stilgard warriors were doing here, since they were far from their home. The knights tried to respond, but at that moment, a new hero entered the scene. James appeared from the darkness and said that he was ready to personally answer for the actions of his warriors. His gaze was calm and sharp as a dagger. Even an experienced knight noticed this. Everyone was surprised because James had long been famous for his stupidity and laziness, and now he looked so confident. Even his voice had been changed through internal cultivation, and this helped to create a first impression. James loudly stated his first and last name and explained that he was the heir to the Stilgard family. This was enough to make the second captain confused because he did not expect to meet the heir at all. James sees no reason that prohibits him from being in this city, much less taking his warriors with him. He stopped here on his way to the academy because he is interested in the architecture of the second city of Navarro. On the other hand, James is also interested in understanding what Albert is doing in this city. The knight said that the owner had the same reasons and was going to apologize for what happened. Albert couldn't resist and intervened in the conversation because he never apologizes to anyone. Meanwhile, the captain understood the situation much more deeply. He knows that the Stilgard family cannot be suppressed by the title of Marquis. If you try to offend this family, there will be a backlash, but Albert stubbornly does not understand this. James sees that no one has sorted out the situation because Albert also just arrived when the conflict had already arisen. Apparently, he is so self-confident and stupid that he doesn't even need to figure it out. He believes that his title of Marquis is higher than that of Baron, and these words make the Knights of Stilgard prepare for battle. Meanwhile, James does not lose his composure at all. He understands that they just want to upset his mental balance. He laughed loudly and said that he had never heard anything more stupid in his life. Albert instantly became angry and immediately apologized. The situation escalated to the limit. James turned to the alien knights and asked them to tell him exactly what had happened here. In their opinion, the Knights of Stilgard started shouting and starting a fight, and they were the ones to blame for everything. He decided that he needed to question both sides of the conflict and now turned his attention to Michael. This knight confirmed that they were ready to fight, but only after they heard ridicule directed at them. Apparently they were ridiculed because they could not match the achievements of their past, and they behaved too arrogantly based on the achievements of Paul Stilgard. Michael admitted that he provoked the conflict, but he does not regret his actions at all. If they listen to this lazily, they will lose the right to be called knights. One of the Marquis's warriors admitted that this was exactly how the situation had developed. This was enough to make Derek lose his temper because he realized that his warriors were wrong. James asked his knights to raise their heads and said they had done a great job. As a family member who inherited a heart of steel, he cannot ignore what happened. The Stilgard family is a steel heart that emerged to protect the Navarro territory. They will continue their work and will stop at nothing, because it is precisely in protection that their purpose lies. They will not pay attention to those who laugh at them, but will tirelessly move forward with their heads held high. James turned to his enemies once again and asked them if they really considered them a waste of space. Even Derek was surprised at how well this young heir of his family defended his name. It was clear that the blood of his legendary grandfather flowed in him, and he was not going to deviate from his intended path. Provocation will only get the situation out of control, but it is clear that Albert is having a hard time controlling himself. The second captain understood perfectly well what was happening, and therefore immediately intervened. He began to hit his warriors one by one, not ignoring any of them. Several guys were knocked out hard, and only a few were lucky enough to stay on their feet. He made them accept their mistake and immediately apologize for such behavior, which should not happen again. They actually apologized, although it was clear that Albert did not support the knights' actions at all. He pretended that the conflict was only between the knights so that Albert would not feel offended. It was a smart retreat by an experienced warrior that did not lead to a loss of reputation and authority. Albert couldn't stand it and turned around to go to his room or sleep. His nerves were not ready for this. Finally, James said that he accepted his personal apology and was not offended by what happened. Thus, the conflict was ended, but this story will affect the future relationship between the Marquis and the Baron. From the very morning, Albert looked incredibly irritated and angry at the whole world around him. All this time, he read the young heir as the stupidest of the family, but this turned out to be just a rumor. Derek explained that he was forced to do so because the conflict could anger the Lord. In any case, Albert wants to teach this arrogant guy a lesson and will definitely find an opportunity to take revenge. James and his warriors have already set off for the capital, but they will be able to meet in the future because Albert is also heading that way. In the evening, the Marquis went on a well-deserved rest and calmly enjoyed a sweet sleep. Nothing could disturb his peace until he felt someone hit him in the face with a palm. He came to his senses and tried to get up, but saw James in front of him, who pinned him to the bed. The Marquis did not understand where the young heir got so much strength from, because it felt like he was a huge knight. All this time, James was looking for the best way to take revenge, but seeing his face, he changed his mind at the last moment. In fact, everything is very simple, because in this face one could read envy that was impossible to hide. In this life, everything will be the same. The Marquis will continue to pursue Stilgard and will try to take everything from them. And tonight, his life hangs by a thread because he can end his miserable existence right now. In his past life, James couldn't understand why Albert was doing all these nasty things. To such questions, the Marquis always answered that she hated the Stilgard family from their first meeting. Because of this, he seized their lands and is trying to take away even their bright name so that they are left with nothing. The Marquis is confident that he is in no way inferior to James, because he also learned steel breathing and was also good at martial arts. However, due to the glory of past generations, James was greeted with a smile everywhere, but now he has turned into a pathetic slug. Now he is a landless lord with no family support and no means of support. The great Marquis Albert won this war and cannot rejoice enough at his success. This is exactly how their relationship developed in their past life, although now Albert does not understand anything, because he does not know what James knows. As soon as the Baron let go of his hand, Albert immediately began to scream and call for help from Derek. At that moment, his voice disappeared because James pressed the pressure point and blocked the ability to speak. Until he unlocks this point, the Marquis is forced to remain silent and listen to everything that is said to him. Albert was not going to give up. He jumped out of bed and ran to the door, hoping to find at least some support. He thought he could run away from the past, but the past always catches up with you at the most inopportune moment. James is too strong now. He is no longer the weak, unprepared guy he was in his past life. He asked the Marquis not to create unnecessary problems, but rather to carry out exactly what he was ordered to do. James put a piece of paper in front of him and ordered him to write down everything he said. As soon as the Baron realized that the Marquis was not going to obey him, he immediately took out his sword. He wanted to show with his decisive actions that he would achieve the desired result in any case. With a slight wave of his hand, he cut off his hand and said that if Albert did not carry out his order, he would instantly lose his head. For some time the Marquis had difficulty speaking, because he was constantly screaming and died from pain. He was asked not to complicate the situation, and therefore he himself is to blame for what happened, although it is not too late to fix everything. Now he quickly got to his feet and said that he would definitely write everything that was needed. The pain made him submissive. He tried to calm himself with the thought that the prosthesis could replace his living hand. Equally, all the dirty work is taken over by his servants, so the hand is not considered a vital necessity. He hopes that Dirac will hear the noise in the room and come to the rescue, because he is a knight of the first rank. It turned out that James heard all his thoughts from the very beginning and played with him like a cat with a mouse. The Marquis is trying to buy time and is not going to allow him such privileges. Soon the work was completed, and Albert was trying to understand whether he would survive or die from loss of blood. James gave him back his voice, and at that very moment the Marquis immediately began to scream as if he were being slaughtered like a pig. The calmness of the young heir of the Steelguard family can be easily explained because he is not a fool at all. As soon as he entered this room, he immediately used the scroll of silence so that not a single sound would escape from here to the outside world. The Marquis does not deserve the power and wealth he has received since childhood, and all because of his inferiority complex. Although Albert tried to stop his enemy, James remembered his past life and everything that happened in it too well. Now the Marquis was left not only without an arm, but also without a head, in the literal sense of the word. Now all that remains is to use bone acid to completely cover up your tracks and destroy the evidence. The Knights of Steelguard travel on horseback and are quite far from this city. It's impossible to return so quickly in one night, and so, although James will fall under suspicion, he has an excellent alibi. He completely disappeared thanks to the invisibility skill, and along with him, the owner of this room disappeared. In his suicide note, Albert wrote that he apologized to his father, but considered himself unworthy of bearing the title of Marquis. He refuses any responsibility and plans to escape in order to find an opportunity for a new life. Soon James returned to his carriage, which was accompanied by warriors of the knightly clan Steelguard. He had hardly slept that night, so he looked too sluggish and lacking energy. The revenge he had so longed for had been accomplished, but strangely enough he did not receive the satisfaction he had so longed for. Something is bothering him. Perhaps he should have planned his revenge more carefully because everything happened too quickly. On the other hand, such an opportunity might not arise in the future, so there is no point in regretting it. In his past life he made many mistakes, but now he has closed his internal grievances a little and calmed down. His actions were prompted by the family's downfall, although it happened independently of Albert, just like the disappearance of his father. It feels like Albert wasn't the main evil, he just attacked the weak James, who was left all alone. Now you need to come to your senses because there is still a long path of trial and error ahead, which you need to go through with complete confidence in your own abilities. Now James can take care of the magical Albert ball that he took from his room. You should definitely think about selling this artifact because you can earn good money for it. Although it belongs to a low circle, this magic can be used for the benefit of knights. James wondered about his skill level, as he had not practiced real combat for a long time. He immediately remembered the knight Dirac, who seemed very experienced and strong, and it would be very interesting to have a sparring match with him. Now James can easily fight the first class, because he is the heir to the mystical blade. Considering his age, he understands that he has achieved outstanding results, but he cannot stop there. He even thought about using Albert's sword in his own battles, but in that case he would quickly be suspected. The best solution would be to sell it, and now there is already an offer to buy this sword for 500 coins. Just when it seemed like the sword was almost sold, James turned his attention to his little pet. He had completely forgotten about Sari, because this was a good opportunity to test the potential value of Bulgasari. These little monsters love to eat metal, and James couldn't resist indulging Sari a little. Although he could have earned a considerable amount, Investing in Sari could also be considered a successful investment. It was time to see what Sari had learned during all this time, because the magic sword should have been of benefit to him. From the very first seconds, Sari decided to act very confidently and demonstrate his full potential. Somehow, this little monster created a protective barrier around itself and surprised its owner. It became clear that the value of the beast was already at the highest level, and this was only the beginning of its development. Soon, Sari was even able to take the form of the sword he had just eaten and had now officially reached his maximum capabilities. It all happened very quickly, but as it turned out, Sari still needs to practice this skill because not everything is so perfect. Now it is not entirely clear what level he is at, but nevertheless the progress is still too noticeable. For James, his pet is still the best in the world, and incredible adventures await them ahead. He consciously rejected any artifacts in the internal storage and took a risk and chose the black egg. This adventure turned out to be not perfect, but nevertheless, James got a pretty good result. In this life, everything is going completely differently, and now he has a very good feeling about the future. Thanks to his finances, he can buy many important things for his development, as well as for the development of Bulgasari. James bought a lot of elixirs and started the selling process. Meanwhile, they finally reached medium. Their forced route was difficult, but now they are closer than ever to the gates leading to the capital. Mikhail cannot understand what the young heir is doing because he spends all his time locked up. Harvest said that there was no point in worrying since the young master was preparing to enter the academy. Meanwhile, James began to have a real nervous breakdown, and he could do nothing about it. His elixirs sell catastrophically poorly. There is almost no demand for them, and only a few copies have been sold. It feels like this is too expensive an item and not everyone can afford to buy it. This is very strange because apart from James, no one sells this product cheaper. That is, he has the best offer on the market. It turns out that there are a lot of terrible reviews around James's store, even though all of these people didn't buy his products. At first, he didn't understand what was happening, but then he realized that it was all some kind of coalition against his business. These guys are called part-time workers. It is not known where this term came from, but this is the pseudonym they are known by on the exchange. They are among the 5 Tier 1 affiliate stores, just as James expected. The 5 main elixir makers who represent each Murim world have united against him. James undercuts them and keeps them from working, making him public enemy number 1 for the coalition. They tried to unite and immediately suppress the competitor's capabilities before it became too powerful. James accepts the challenge and promises to drag them through the mud and then tear them apart in this business duel. They got involved with a completely useless person with whom one can joke, and they will regret their actions. Soon the sellers found out that this crazy guy from the first system had complained about them. They began to discuss what to do and how exactly to stop James, because in this case their reputation could also suffer. Each participant in the dialogue had their own vision of how to resolve the conflict, but they all agreed that they could not give in to the young impudent fellow. Although they understand that there is no point in arguing with each other, the situation really gets on their nerves. James calmly observed their nerves and realized that he was taking the initiative. He joined their conversation and said that he didn't understand why they were so angry. At this moment, which reached its maximum tension, the general chat was suddenly blocked. The silence mode was turned on, and it seemed that the traders immediately understood what it meant. The channel master named Monfils appeared and thanked everyone who joined the conversation. This meeting was prepared to hear a complaint against the merchant James. After the workers had calmed down, the regime was again unblocked to hear all sides of the conflict. Apparently the merchants don't want James to complain about them, because that would damage their reputation. They must find the right way out of this conflict, but James is not going to play by someone else's rules. He provided all the evidence and confirmed that all the complaints about his product were fictitious, because these people did not buy his elixir. He confirmed that a team of part-time workers was organized against him, and he was not going to give up without a fight. Monfils checked the information and agreed that the document could indeed be considered evidence. However, he is only responsible for the channel and does not intend to look for part-time workers. Justice is not part of his job, and apparently this answer will be very satisfying to the sellers' union. They understand that they are the ones who bribed the part-time workers, and if there is no investigation, they will only benefit from this. James hoped until the very end that Monfils would be neutral and help resolve the conflict, but this turned out not to be the case. It turns out that all these guys are in the same boat, and it will be very difficult to fight them. All cartels come together in a pretty clear way, and James always understood that. Partner stores offer bonuses, and the channel master provides them with comfortable conditions. James knew about their close relationship, but nevertheless, he still continued to believe in universal justice. He finally took a chance and said he had evidence that the traders were involved with the part-time workers. It was clear that this was a bluff, but nevertheless, all participants in the conflict immediately became tense. Instead of talking a lot, James is ready to attach a document that will explain everything. As soon as the merchants and the channel master saw this document, they were immediately speechless. James kept records of exchange transactions and was thus able to find evidence. Even the channel master was shocked, because such information cannot be obtained by an ordinary mortal. He was forced to admit that the attached file was real, and now the traders were in a difficult position. Now we need to talk about sanctions. Traders will be forced to stop their trade for 30 days. James said that they could come to an agreement since he didn't really care about justice. Either the traders will be suspended from work, or they will immediately pay him a substantial compensation. Of course, compensation is disadvantageous, but on the other hand, the lack of work will lead to even greater losses. James is willing to settle the matter with only 3 companies, and the remaining 2 must be punished. One company has already refused to pay compensation, so there is only one more to choose. James plans to hold an auction and see who can offer the most compensation. This cunning plan was created in order to gain maximum benefit and punish the rivals. Monfils may exercise his right to end this dispute, in which case he will arouse even more suspicion. He chose to play the role of observer and refused to stop James. Thus, the auction has officially begun, and all that remains is to place the first bid. The offers immediately fell on the young salesman's head, and he was clearly pleased. A cartel is a group that has come together solely to make a profit. This means that they can stab each other in the back at any convenient moment. This auction lasted for many hours until the healthcare center, the Great Mountain, raised the price to the sky. An astronomical 12,000 gold coins, and everyone around immediately fell silent. He understands that he will lose more if he does not trade, so he decided to take this step. So the decision was made. James got the money, and at the same time punished most of the sellers. It was a fiasco for them, and now they will remember this self-confident guy for a long time. James warned that he would act even more aggressively if the situation were to happen again. The salesman soon left the conversation, but you hated him for the rest of your life. Only the channel master remained in the dialogue and was in no hurry to leave the chat. All this time he has been condescending because he still thinks that James is an auditor. Monfils is absolutely confident in his theory, because only the auditor could have obtained such information as evidence. James immediately realized that he had now gotten his hands on a golden ticket, a chance for even greater power. Now he will not miss these opportunities and will pretend that he is a real auditor. Understands that any crisis is an opportunity, and you can always get out of it dry. He won the confrontation with the 5 largest manufacturers of the first system. And also don't forget that the channel master mistakenly takes him for an auditor. James has earned a lot of money lately and has forgotten about his debts. Now he can sleep peacefully. Soon their journey continued, and in a short period of time they would find themselves in the capital. Even though he got easy money, this does not mean that he should spend it thoughtlessly. James tries to choose the best use and make the right investment in his future. Now his internal strength has reached its maximum. He needs to raise his internal energy level. This can be done by cultivating internal qi energy, but it will not be so easy to do. The best way is to train calmly in a normal mode, moving slowly but surely. This is exactly how it was before measurement deals, but now you can save a huge amount of time. James chose some equipment to buy and asked Siak for advice. The merchant said that there is one problem, because the more magical power you absorb, the less your abilities become. You always need to maintain balance, because the deeper you delve into magic, the more difficult it is to master martial arts. In the past, choices and opportunities were limited, but now the era has come where everyone can learn and master martial arts. Perception has changed a lot, and now you always have to think before you start learning. To reach a high level, you need to expand your capabilities with pure martial arts. This means that you need to forget about magical techniques for a while. It would be fun to hit someone with aura lightning, but that opportunity needs to be put off until later. Now it remains to choose a teaching method. It is not easy. There are many options. James decided to focus on the Northern Lights technique because it is the pure essence of martial arts. James had a difficult choice because every art has its strengths and weaknesses, but he always tried to make a choice in favor of the option that would give him the greatest benefit. At the end of the conversation, something strange happened, because Siak fell to his knees and began to beg for mercy. He is tired of this terrible life and asks to give him another chance to get out. The merchant asks for the martial art called the Heavenly Cultivation Technique to be returned to him. Murim is a twisted world that goes crazy for martial arts. Absolutely everyone here has at least some talent for martial arts, regardless of their age and gender. Of course, Siak's life changed after he lost his art and became an ordinary newbie. Without any words, everything is obvious because now he is surrounded by real animals. Now his motives become clear, why he humiliates himself so much in request to return his art. If he makes even one wrong move, his wife immediately starts beating him half to death, and this is not good at all. Siak advises the master to learn the Northern Lights, and then James will no longer need the technique of celestial motivation. He will not lose anything at all, but on the contrary, he will only become stronger and will also help the merchant. If the merchant wants to get his equipment back, he must find the best solution to this problem, and he has only 24 hours to do so. It's time to move to the residence of the Kunz family, where they learned about the disappearance of young Albert. Knight Dirk arrived at the residence and told everything that had happened, waiting for the Marquis's reaction. Marquis Dorian immediately recognized his son's handwriting, but still cannot believe what happened. Apparently, he thinks that his son was threatened, and under pressure he was forced to write such a letter. His son was too greedy to just give up everything and go nowhere. If he really ran away somewhere, then there should have been traces left, but they could not be found. This means that young Albert may have had enemies who were waiting for the perfect moment to take revenge. This was the theory voiced by the knight, but the Marquis found it difficult to believe. I had to tell him what happened a few days ago in the city of Arcadio. When the Marquis heard this whole story, he turned into a mad beast. Now he understands why their knight is not respected at all, and why they think that Dirk has no dignity at all. He no longer wants to hear about apologies in conflict situations, because that's not what he pays the knights for. He also learned that the youngest heir of the Stilgard family is different from the rumors that describe him as a loser. It feels like he could be Paul's true successor, and that phrase means a lot. Then James looked exactly as if he hated Albert with all his soul and wanted him dead. Knight Dirk is absolutely convinced that there is some connection between these events. He must begin an investigation immediately, and the Marquis gives him the right to do so immediately. The main thing is not to act hastily under any circumstances and to be very careful. That very night, the merchant Siak risked his own life to regain his martial art. He really did his best because he broke into the library and stole something special. When James saw this gift in the morning, he could not hide his happiness. Now in his hands is the secret record of the heavenly sword of the lost soul. In Murim, this art is one of the top 3 ball-handling techniques and is one of the most famous. If you learn this technique, you can forget about making concessions to the great masters of the sword. The merchant said that he really risked his life when he stole equipment from the library. Now, once John gets the Northern Lights technique, he can give the merchant his art. Siak promised to do everything in the best possible way by tomorrow night and left the dialogue. Meanwhile, Knight Michael announced that they had almost reached the city of Tiar. James, along with his assistant, head straight to the academy. Meanwhile, the rest of the knights and servants should find an inn and get some rest. James finally made it to the Royal Knight Academy. He found himself here again after 15 long years, although it seemed like yesterday. Together with Harvis, they went to the admissions office to enroll in the academy. As soon as they found out that James was a member of the Steelguard family, their attitude towards him immediately changed. He was received warmly and told that the academy was happy to meet such a talented guy. All members of the Steelguard family studied here, and the head of the commission hopes that the Count has reached new heights. He was always praised as the heir to a great warrior, but Ray was unable to become stronger than his father. James's brothers and sisters were even weaker, and with each new generation, the family's strength began to decline. Now he has a chance to become stronger, and he will do everything possible to bring glory to the Steelguard family again. James must pass an entrance test, as the academy does not provide special privileges to influential families. It only remains to figure out what kind of test awaits the young heir. The first test will be leaving a palm print on the back of a stone wall, Instructor Circle said. James should not be throwing punches, but just feeling like he is pushing the stone. The instructor wants to see overall mana management if the Baron wants to pass the test and not get the lowest score. The prints on this wall look pretty weak. It's clear that no one came close to the high marks. Only one imprint was truly strong, as if it had been left by a very talented knight. James immediately remembered that in his past life there was a special guy at the academy, and perhaps they would meet again. It shouldn't be difficult for James to complete this task, as his abilities have reached a new level. He immediately activated his aura and tried to demonstrate everything he was capable of. Only at the last moment did he stop in order not to show his full potential and not to arouse unnecessary suspicions. His trace turned out to be quite average, not clear, but not blurred, not deep, but not superficial. He received 5 points for passing the test, considering that 10 points is the maximum score. Now it's time to do a little fencing and show what he can do. Sparkle immediately assessed his skills and realized that in front of him was an ordinary guy, without any special talent. His skills are very average, so the instructor assigns him to the middle rank. James made such concessions deliberately, because he does not want to attract unnecessary attention. Harvis did not understand his master's plans at all and thought that the test had gone very badly. James explained that he did not want his skills to be known, especially in the Empire. Until he has sufficient grounds to challenge the Emperor, he will remain in the shadows. It was a very serious statement, and even Harvey Duracle was surprised. This doesn't sound like empty talk at all, because this young heir's potential is really on the level of Paul Steelguard. It is quite possible that this family will once again be able to bind the Empire with iron chains, thanks to James. He will have to work tirelessly for the next 2 years to successfully graduate from the academy. All this time, Harvis will have to do all the dirty work and continue to be a double agent. If he does everything perfectly, then in 2 years he will be free and will forget about all this horror. James gave him some money and asked him to take a well-deserved rest. They should separate for a while and keep an eye on each other from a distance. Harvis thanked them for their support and headed towards the inn where the Steelguard knights were staying. James has completed all the preparations. Now all that remains is to wait for the collapse of the family, which will begin in 2 years. Now is the time to prove yourself in the academy in the best possible way. Whatever happens in the future, the next 2 years must be spent in constant work. The semester began the day after the entrance ceremony. The academy's curriculum is called Hell Race, as Phil Talabreman, the Viscount's son, explained. He also talked about the internal ranking battle, which is related to the duel between young students. Soon, Instructor Circle entered the room and immediately ordered everyone to shut up. When this man enters the hall, the students immediately know that any disobedience will be punished. He is the one who is responsible for the first-year students and announces the internal ranking match. Opponents will be determined by drawing lots, and each student must prepare for the upcoming battles. Soon everyone gathered at the training complex and the fight began. After several hours of constant competition, it was time for James to test himself. Today he is very unlucky because he will be fighting against Franz, who is at an above-average level. He feels very confident in fencing, but James, on the contrary, did not show his best side. It's even hard to believe that the hero's family is on such a low level, because you expect more from them. Everyone around was sure that the result of the fight would now be crushing, and Franz would win easily. It was clearly hard for James because he is much stronger, but he has to pretend that he is just a beginner. James must win in a way that does not arouse suspicion, and this may be difficult. Soon he had a chance to counterattack, and he took advantage of it. Franz immediately fell to the ground and began to deteriorate in pain. James won. All that remains is to win the second round, and then the competition can be abandoned. The next pair was even more uneven, as Phil would have to fight Darius. Phil had virtually no chance of winning from the start and had to suffer a lot. It was a total beating that was hard to watch, and that's called training. Only at the last moment did the teacher intervene and stop the fight, when it had already gone beyond the bounds of what was permitted. This is a training match, not a fight to the death, and apparently Darius forgets that. After this, the winner approached James and asked him not to worry about his friend. Apparently this guy is too self-confident, but James is not going to respond to his attacks. He felt sorry for Phil, even though this guy was too annoying. It wasn't his fault that he lacked talent. This is exactly what James was like in his past life, constantly angry at his own incompetence. It is imperative that this guy be avenged and justice must prevail. In the second round, James met Darius and immediately began to actively defend himself. His opponent is aggressive and assertive, but this makes him too vulnerable. He who constantly thinks about attack forgets about defense and always risks losing. Not only did James easily defend himself from his attacks, but he also easily found opportunities to counterattack. Soon the games ended, as it was time to deliver the decisive blow and finish the fight. None of the spectators expected such an outcome, because it was like a battle between David and Goliath. James really took the victory into his own hands, and no one doubted his superiority. Darius promised to take revenge and within a week to brutally destroy his new enemy. He became so angry that Lee could hardly contain his emotions in front of the instructor. At that moment, everyone around knew that James belonged to the Stilgard family. Compared to the Darius family, the Stilgard is on a completely different level because it is a family of heroes. If Darius knew about this from the very beginning, he would have behaved completely differently and would not have said anything unnecessary. Everyone knows about the power of the Stilgard family. The legends about these warriors still live in the memories of people. After finishing the training, the students went to their rooms and got ready for bed. From the very morning, James noticed that Phil was no longer in the room. Apparently, the defeat gave him an additional boost of motivation. In fact, this guy is much better than James in his past life, because back then he was constantly crying because of defeats. On the first day of the academy, cadets will have to climb a rocky mountain as a test. This workout is called the Hell Race because of the fog-shrouded peak and steep slope. However, for James, everything turned out to be quite simple. He didn't even break a sweat. The word was just exercise. Soon he saw Franz in front of him, with whom he fought in the first round of the competition. Apparently, he was waiting for a meeting with James. He said that they needed to go somewhere together because it concerned Phil, James's roommate. It turned out that this guy was caught in a rockfall, and we needed to hurry immediately to save his life. James thinks otherwise, because in such cases you need to call an instructor, but Phil insists on his own. There is no doubt that this is a trap. James recognized the danger at the very beginning of the dialogue. If he ignores this situation, he will get even more problems in the future. It would be better to resolve this issue here and now, so that he is not bothered again. Franz returned to his comrades with a wide smile on his face, because everything was going according to plan. He didn't set this trap alone because Darius is the leader of this bandit clan. They are confident that they will be able to punish James for all his misdeeds, but once again, they underestimate their opponent. Yesterday they should have realized who he really was, but apparently anger clouded their minds too much. Today they gathered in a group of 5 to look more confident, but it won't help them. At the moment there were only 4 of them, but James immediately guessed that there was a 5th member of the team hiding somewhere. He was absolutely right. because there was help in the forest all this time, in case of unforeseen circumstances. Darius is not afraid of the Stilgard family. He knows that all the descendants of the legendary warrior are much weaker than their predecessor. He believes that James has no right to be called Stilgard and should immediately change his last name. It turned out that the middle brother of the family used to study at the academy and told a lot of bad rumors about James. He said that he considered his younger brother too weak, and Darius remembered these words very well. Apparently none of this matters much, because James has changed, and the opinion of him will change too. He was surrounded, but he was not at all worried and did not show any signs of panic. As soon as the opponents came within arm's reach, they immediately felt the power of his fists. James didn't stand on ceremony at all, because these guys don't deserve to be treated well. Darius personally watched as this overconfident guy destroyed his entire coalition of evil. He could no longer control his emotions and took the risk of challenging James one-on-one. With a slight movement of his hand, the young heir of the Stilgard family stopped this powerful blow. He quickly dislocated Darius's arm, causing him to suffer and scream in excruciating pain. For him, it was like playing with a child, because now he was not hiding his true nature at all. There was no instructor nearby, so there was no need to worry about attracting unnecessary attention and to have a little fun. Phil found it hard to believe that the guy who shared his room had such incredible potential. The main thing is that he doesn't forget that all this must remain a secret, otherwise we'll have to cut out his tongue. After a successful lesson on the Rocky Mountain, life at the academy turned into a sweet raspberry. The only problem was boredom, because James was on a completely different level than the rest of the students. He was not at all interested in listening to the basic knowledge of martial arts that he had learned 6 months ago. One fine day, while sitting in class, he learned that the absorption of the heavenly radiance technique was complete. As in any other big city, in the capital of Navarro you can find excellent infrastructure. James loves to go outside late at night and blend into the darkness. In this way, he gets guaranteed freedom of action and can do whatever he wants. All this time he is in the shadows for a reason, because he has a clear task, to keep an eye on a certain person. For today, he had been watching him from the darkness for countless hours and continued his preparations. Even from behind, he can recognize him from 1,000 other people, because in front of him is Instructor Serkal. Now it's time to put on your personal mask and set out to meet new adventures. The instructor looked unhappy. He didn't want to deal with this, but now he had no way to change anything. While he was lost in thought, a deadly technique formed around him that he couldn't help but notice. It was James who wore a human mask and also took a voice-changing pill. Almost instantly, he disappeared from the instructor's sight, making him even more worried. Bad thoughts began to creep into Circle's head, and he realized that he needed to get out of here immediately. He hurried out onto the opposite street, but it was not so easy to get away from James. The academy instructor, instead of being a role model, became addicted to alcohol and women. Of course all this is possible, but love between a night instructor and a waitress is too much. If this information leaks to the masses, then only the lazy will not discuss Circle. The instructor couldn't understand who this man was and how he knew everything, but at least he no longer felt the murderous aura. He almost instantly made the decision to catch this scoundrel and find out the whole truth no matter what. James easily dodged this attack as his true level is incredibly high. The instructor wanted to continue the battle, but when he saw that murderous aura, he stopped at the last moment. Only now did he realize that he was up against a first-class user and that his chances of winning were practically nil. James is so well informed about the situation that he even knows the waitress's name, Sylvia. He has no intention of embarrassing the instructor and is willing to keep his secret. James suggested that they go somewhere else and talk in private so that no one could hear the conversation. Within a few minutes they were in a cozy pub in a separate room for guests. It turned out that Sylvia is Circle's daughter, from her mistress, and they only have a family relationship. It does a job it doesn't like at all, but at least it can smile sometimes when it sees its father. James offered to immediately buy his daughter's freedom, even though it would require a lot of money. Apparently, with the instructor's salary, This is impossible, because they demand more than 10,000 gold coins for it. It is almost impossible to take her by force because she is being held by the Black Mamba organization. This huge group controls the entire dark side of the capital, and even the city guards are afraid of them. Sylvia works in an establishment run by this group, and the situation is really difficult. It seemed that the instructor ruined his life because of his love for the waitress, but in fact everything is completely different because she is his daughter. Initially, James tried to use this information as pressure on the instructor, but now it is clear that this was a mistake. It would be better to help this guy and leave him in your debt. James spoke about his intentions, but for this he will need to help the student James Steelguard. The instructor was very surprised by such a request, because it really sounded strange. Tsirkal said that he would never do such a thing. Any mention of injustice is alien to him. James explained that it is not necessary to give the student good marks, it is enough to just pay attention to him. In exchange, he is ready to rescue Silvius and finally reunite his daughter with her father. His daughter won't even have to leave the capital, because he will do everything at the highest level. The instructor continued to refuse, and I realized that it was time to surprise this guy. James could no longer hide his true nature, and realized that he had to take off his mask here and now. Circle could not believe his eyes. For some time he stood as if hypnotized and did not move at all. In front of him was indeed a first-year student, James Steelguard, who seemed to have no talent at all. He couldn't believe that this student had defeated him in battle and displayed such an incredible aura. Just yesterday he was an ordinary teenager, and today he demonstrated the highest class. At 16, James has reached a high level and can now dictate his terms. All he asks for is to be allowed to skip classes completely legally. The instructor still could not recover from the shock, but nevertheless, he understood that he had to agree to all the conditions. As soon as the conversation was over, James immediately went to fulfill his obligation. He came to the Black Mamba establishment and told the owner that he wanted to take Sylvia with him. It really did look a bit strange, and Sylvia couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Before this conversation began, James warned her that he had come to save her. The owner of the establishment said that he was ready to let the girl go, but only on the basis of a high payment. He was sure that this guy would refuse, but James immediately took out a bag of money and put it on the table. After that, he said that he was taking the waitress with him and no longer wanted to deal with the Black Mamba. They almost left, but at the last moment Kai stopped him and said that they were not finished yet. He said that he changed his mind about letting the girl go because she brings in much more profit. He is ready to let her go, but to do so he must receive 13 times the amount. That was exactly what he calculated, given the profit Sylvia made per year. If he refuses, he can take his money back and get out of here. James asked him to reconsider his opinion, or they would have to immediately engage in a sword fight. He asked Sylvia to worry and stand behind him because nothing bad would happen to her. As soon as Kai ordered his warriors to deal with this fool, something unthinkable happened. Almost instantly, one of his guards was brutally knocked out and showed no signs of life. James said that he wanted to resolve the issue in a good way, but was forced to act differently. As soon as